in my own destiny. Here on the job, no, it is not hard to see that it's the union of our hearts that makes us a band.
Welcome to Labor's View. This show is brought to you by the very hardworking and dedicated employees of the Essex County Division of Welfare. They are members of a union. That union is the Communications Workers of America, Local 1081. I'm David Weiner, president of the union and also host of this show, Labor's View. We come to you tonight singularly. I am alone, and I've done this before, without any guests, hence alone. And we're going to discuss issues that are, again, germane to our members, but as you'll see, many of them also affect you as non-members of our union, non-government or county employees, but as taxpayers and residents of the County of Essex and wherever else we're seen. So, the first two issues have to deal with our Governor Christie. Governor Christie has done two things lately that has not endeared him any further than the very little he had ever been endeared to labor, and particularly to the Communications or Workers of America, or working people anywhere, or a lot of other people. The one thing he did was he has a problem. His problem is that he constantly, ever since he's come into office, he overestimates the amount of revenue that the state is going to realize in any particular year, whether first quarterly, then half a year, but in any particular year. So every year, and this is not just I saying this is in the newspaper, the county, because of his overestimations, the county doesn't get the amount of revenue that it should. And therefore, he's been filling in the amount that's short because the county must balance its budget every year. He fills it in when one stop, not the county, I'm sorry, the state has to do its budget every year, has to balance it. So he fills it in with one-shot revenues, taking money away from environmental issues, reducing or eliminating the earned income tax credit for poor people, on and on and on and on. So this year, he came in $807 million to $1 billion or $1 billion more short. So this is what he decides to do. Two things he's going to do, and one in particular, is he's going to take the amount of money he was supposed to have put into the public employees pension fund, which has been underfunded for years. The reason the fund has been underfunded for years is because, and he says this, and it happens to be true, that most of his predecessors, Democrats and Republicans alike, starting pretty much with Governor Christie Whitman, have been not paying into the pension system, the state share. The employees, whether they be state, county, or city employees, have always paid. We've never not paid our share. Always comes out every 2 weeks. And the county, in the case of our county, they've always paid, or it's always paid. But the state didn't pay for many, many years. Why? Part of the reason is, for many years, the excuse they used was that because the economy was so good that they could, the pension was theoretically flush with funds, and it was valued at 100% or more of what would be needed, and they based that on if everybody were to retire at one time, plus the retirees, how much money do you have? So Christie Whitman started the process, and each governor thereafter. The only one who really put some money in before Christie was Governor Corzine, who preceded him, and I think he put in about $2 billion, but that was about it. Well, come 2008, with the great crash and recession, all of a sudden everybody's portfolios, your 401k if you have one, and the pension system for the public employees of the state of New Jersey, all of a sudden the value gets diminished by, in some cases, a half. So now you have a real problem, because now you don't have enough money to fund for the retirees necessarily in combination with the active employees. Now, the government will say there's enough money for the retirees, but not enough for the active employees. Again, no fault of the employees. We've always paid our share. In fact, our share was increased by 2 percentage points in 2011 as part of that unholy Trinity alliance between Senate President Sweeney and his patron, Mr. Norcross, political patron, and the governor and our county executive, Joe DiVincenzo, and his political patron, the Honorable Steve Adubato Sr. So they not only increased our pension by 2% that we had to pay, but at the same time, they also said all you employees have to increase, or in some cases for the first time, in our case it was increase, your amount of money that you pay for your health benefits. So we went from 1.5% of our salaries to, over a course of 3 or 4 years, it went from anywhere up to 35% or more of our salaries, depending on how much we make and what plan we're in, the actual cost that the county pays for the health benefits for the employees. So, for example, I'm into the traditional plan, one of the few people left because I'm old and I've been around a long time, and that's the so-called Cadillac plan, but I'm paying for that Cadillac. So at 1.5% of salary, let's say I was paying $800 before per year at 1.5%. It's now going to go up, the last increase goes up this July. It's going to go up to about $7,000 to $8,000 per year, okay? And what's on top of that, every single January, in the case of the county and the municipalities and even the state, what happens is the companies with whom they contract to run the plan, whether it be Horizon or our case Aetna, they, as an insurance company, based on the experience, how many people use the plan, they also increase their price to the government, in this case to the county. So the county's increase from Aetna for 2014 was 9.6%. So on top of all that we're paying, all that money we're paying for our share of the cost of the county's costs because of the legislation, we're also paying this year an additional 9.6%. So virtually you'll be working for nothing, because the only raises you can get at max are 2% per year, because there's a cap that the governor and the Trinity worked out, and their political minions. There's a cap of 2%. Now that ran out technically, but most of the governments are still abiding by that 2% cap in terms of salaries. So when you have a 2% cap on your salary and you're regressing in terms of the amount of money you're putting out of pocket for insurance, you can see where it becomes a real hardship, particularly for those who are in the lower titles, such as clerical titles, who might be making $27,000, $30,000 a year. It becomes extremely burdensome and very, very, very hard for them. So our union is going to, and other unions as well, I believe the NGA, teachers union statewide, they're going to be suing because we're maintaining it's a violation of the agreement that was made when that legislation was passed in 2011. The next move that the governor has done, he started this or threatened this sometime last year. We thought it had gone away to a degree, but we really knew it hadn't gone away. And that is a very important topic known as civil service. Civil service is not all towns and not all counties are in civil service. Most are, though, in the state of New Jersey, and state workers are. And what it is that there are rules and regulations on how people get hired. By and large, people have to take a civil service test, pass it high enough, and then be hired by the respective governmental unit, whether it be the state, the county, or the city. And similarly, if that governmental entity wanted to do a major discipline or terminate the employment of that individual, that individual has a right to appeal to civil service, and they generally do that, and they certainly should, through their union. So we have a number of them going on. So what the governor did was he says, well, he has the Civil Service Commission made up of 3 individuals, all of whom he appoints. And they, on I believe May 7th, adopted a series of rules changes that the governor had proposed. And it only affects state employees, not local government employees like county employees, our members, and city employees, but just state employees. And very simply, it enables them to take a bunch of titles that they maintain are similar and put them into a band. It's called broadbanding. And then more importantly and more insidiously, it allows the employer to, instead of having this person at this title take a test to become, let's say, a supervisor, management can just say, well, I think that person's doing a better job. Doesn't matter that the other person's been here longer. Doesn't matter that the other person has been denied the opportunity to be tested. And why does this matter? Well, it matters because the reason civil service was created, which is 100 years ago, was because there was so much patronage and so much, which means hiring of your friends and families and political cronies and controlling them and controlling monies and contracts. It got so dirty that they created the civil service system. Now, what concrete examples do we have to be worried about this type of change? Bridgegate and the ancillary issue to Bridgegate. Now, Bridgegate was the closing of 3 access lanes from Fort Lee into the George Washington Bridge from New Jersey onto the bridge. And there's all kinds of investigations going on right now as we speak, which is May 21st, 2014. You've got 3 or 4 investigations going on. You've got the feds, and you've got the investigators on the other side in New York, and you've got the legislative committee, joint legislative committee in New Jersey investigating them. And one after one, people go before. And what it turns out is a couple of people or more in the Christie administration, for some reason, and no one's saying exactly why, ordered these lanes closed. Actually, it was supposed to be up to a month. But after 4 days, a guy that was in charge, because it's bi-state, the guy in charge of the other side of the bridge, a guy named Foy, who got appointed by, I believe, by Cuomo, Governor Cuomo, he got wind of it and said, knock it off. And they were trying to say it was a traffic study. What they basically did was they closed those lanes or diverted them down to 1 so that you had the entire city of Fort Lee was a parking lot. Ambulances couldn't get through, et cetera, et cetera. So that was allegedly one of the reasons is the mayor didn't play ball and he's a Democrat, didn't endorse the governor, because the governor had a list of about 100 Democrats, mayors and others he wanted to endorse him. The other issue has to do with things like why some say the former chair of the Port Authority, who was appointed by the governor, a lawyer named David Sampson, who has a big law firm. His law firm had businesses or represented businesses that had business either directly or indirectly with the Port Authority. And there were rumors and allegations made by, like, Hoboken Mayor Dawn Zimmer, that she had been pressured by one of Christie's, in fact, his lieutenant governor, who used to be my sheriff where I lived down the shore in Monmouth County. She was allegedly pressured to endorse him, or else she wouldn't get as much Sandy money, because her city was just flooded in Hoboken. And she didn't get the money, all the money she should have gotten. And she didn't do the endorsement. So that's why things like civil service are so important, because it puts, in the old days, Jerry will remember this, the buses, and maybe cars, but buses used to have what they call governors on them. And the governor would only allow the bus to go above a certain miles an hour as a safety thing. You couldn't go above 50 miles an hour. And that's really what things like civil service are intended to do. They're intended to put a governor on the governor and others that are in power from just giving jobs out to people who don't deserve them, maybe such as one might say the people who ordered the closing of the bridge. Maybe they shouldn't have been hired, but they're not civil service. They were hired at the whim and the will of the governor, and they served at his will. And when something hit the fan, he fired them. So, once again, the unions are, I've been told, are going, because I'm just a little guppy in the freshwater sea of labor. But the unions are going to be suing the governor and or the state, whatever's applicable, about not only the civil service changes, but the pension changes, because we're maintaining, the legislature actually passed legislation saying that he couldn't do what he's doing with civil service, but he went ahead and did it anyway. So we'll see what happens. From a parochial point of view, and that sound you might or might not hear is our fax machine, because this is a working office. We work too, but the office is a working office. Conditions in the offices. I've mentioned this before. We have a building. We're in two basic places, three, but two basic ones. One is 9 floors, a 9-floor building at 18 Rector Street, 10 Park Place. Those are two different entrances. And it's privately owned, actually owned by the landlord who owns this building. His name is Miles Berger and his family. And he owns the Robert Treat Hotel, and he owns a lot of stuff, Miles. He does very well. He's a nice guy, and he's a really, really good landlord. And I don't say that gratuitously, because we can move someplace else. But one of the problems we're having, and you might have this at your place of work, is that, like in this room here, you have your drop ceiling, then you have what they call air diffusers. And that's the thing that looks like an accordion kind of thing. And that's where the air is sucked out, and also the fresh air is sent in with either heat or cold, depending on what the time of the season is. Well, unfortunately, for a number of reasons, particularly because it picks up dirt and stuff from the floors and from the atmosphere, the diffusers in that building were filthy. We wrote a grievance. Our union did, and also the rugs are pretty dirty, mostly because they've been doing a lot of construction work, putting wires and stuff. We did a grievance, and Miles responded immediately and is going to be doing, he says, is going to be doing the cleanup of the air diffusers. Sometimes they're called air ducts. And you really have to, because those things can collect, did a lot of research, germs, and with a lot of things going around now, particularly MERS, that's the new one, where they just had a case where it was just transmitted from person to person just by a handshake, which is a very dangerous disease, which normally just causes illnesses, but sometimes it can be fatal. So that's one way our union fights for our members in terms of the conditions under which they have to work. We also have one of our major goals and responsibilities is negotiating contracts. And we're currently as all the unions in Essex County, for the first time in the history of the county, Joe D., the county executive, DiVincenzo, arranged this. All of the unions, the uniforms, meaning the correctional officers, the county police, they're not county police anymore, they're the sheriff's officers, their superiors, the non-uniforms such as our members, the IBW, other locals, we're all up at the same time. So we're hoping soon, and the word is we're going to settle for a 4-year contract soon, everybody basically getting the same thing, but we'll see what happens with that. But that's important to our members, because that all we can get is that 2%, but that 2% is all we have to offset all those increases that I talked about from the health insurance that was imposed upon us through Christie, and the pension increase, where Christie's saying it's still our fault. It's not his fault there's a $1 billion deficit. It's his predecessor's fault. It's the fault of the public employees. They should be paying more for their pension. They should be paying, well, you cut a deal, Governor, in 2011 and said this will, you're quoted, this will solve the problem. Well, it didn't solve the problem, because you won't take revenue from where it should be taken, which is a millionaire's tax. Let the millionaires pay a fair share of their tax. That alone is worth approximately $800 million a year. And there are other things that can be taxed that aren't being taxed. Why? Some say it's because he still has hopes for national ambitions for the president, and so therefore he has to appeal to the right-wing yahoos in some of these states, the tea baggers and all these folks who are against taxes for anything and don't believe in any government, except of course if they have a tornado and it destroys their town, or a Sandy and it destroys property, and then all of a sudden they got their hand out and they want the federal aid. Then they want government. And when they need a policeman when they're being attacked, then they want government. If their house is on fire, then they want government. If they need social services, they fall on hard times, they need food stamps, or they need Medicaid, then they want government. Otherwise, they're against government. Let's see. We've been having trouble with our prescription plan. What I mean by that is, and I say we, I mean all the county employees. When I talked about Aetna earlier. Now, Aetna had been covering the health insurance portion of for the coverage for all the county employees, so that if you went to the doctor, Aetna was involved, and it depends on which plan you were in and what doctor you could see, because networks, all that kind of stuff. Well, yeah, and then we had Benecard, who controlled the prescription. The county hired them to control the prescription. Well, Benecard, for some reason, they bowed out, and Aetna took over. Well, what happened was Aetna's formulary of prescriptions that they cover at certain prices didn't comport with Benecard's list of drugs and prices. So we have people that were paying $25, maybe $40 for a prescription. Now they're getting billed $60, $81. So this coming, I believe, 30th, in a week or so, there's going to be a labor roundtable where the county is going to tell us what they're going to do about this, because our people have to be reimbursed for the money they paid out of pocket above what the rates are supposed to be, because the contracts say you have to give, if there's a change, the health benefit and carriers, the health benefits that the employees receive have to be equal to or better than what they received before. So that's another issue. You know, you've got a child, or yourself and or a child, or a spouse and or a child and a spouse, and you have these various ailments, let's say inhalers or other drugs you have to take. One of our members is asthmatic. I think she takes something called Chlorinex. I never heard of it. It's one thing, I'm not as asthmatic. But she went from paying $25 a prescription, all of a sudden she went into the pharmacy, they said it's $81. So we'll find out on the 30th what the county intends to do with that. We're going through a big thing called welfare reform, and this is statewide. I've talked about this before on this show, and this is where the county welfare agencies have to go through these changes where, because of a number of factors, particularly this huge increase in food stamp clients and Medicaid clients. Now, there's a few reasons for the increase. First of all, food stamps and Medicaid in general have gone up through the roof. And in the case of Essex County, since 2008, they've gone up about 70% each. But the problem is the staffing levels in the agency have remained flat or fewer than we had in 2008. So we don't have the people to handle it. What happened, you might have read in the paper recently about backlog in Medicaid cases getting processed throughout the entire state. People go in, they need Medicaid coverage, they have no doctors that they can go to, and with the Obamacare, the ACA, what that did with Medicaid, it said instead of 133% of the poverty level, in other words, you earned enough money to reach only 133% of the poverty level, which is a set number, they increased that to 138%. So that made more people eligible. So when they come in, we can't process the cases on time. They have no health benefits. They end up going to the emergency room, and then you and I pay for it because that goes into the taxes that we all have to pay. And you know that emergency rooms cost a hell of a lot more than a doctor's office is going to cost. So we're looking at the welfare reform to try to look at how we do our job and how we do our job better. Some of it is absolute nonsense, something called case banking, where if you went into a welfare office, and even if you went into an unemployment office as another example, but in a welfare office, and normally you would see a worker, that worker became your worker. And from then on, any changes you had, because they divided it by alphabet. I have A through G, and then my coworker in my unit has G through whatever, so the 6 people split up the alphabet. I have a set number of people. And then through the year or years, no matter how long you're on, whether it be Medicaid or general assistance, which is a single person welfare, whether it be TANF, which is for a family, it used to be AFDC, you had one worker. Now, through this thing called case banking, you go in, you see somebody, but they're not your worker. Nobody's your worker. Then you're just put into a pool. So whenever you need something else, somebody else will have to be your worker. It could be me, it could be somebody else, and there's no continuity, and it's a complete and utter mess. Not just in Essex County, but also throughout the state. Got a couple of things. We have a director of Division of Welfare. She's not permanent, even though she's civil service. So far, the administration has refused to appoint a deputy director to back her up. So all those changes I talked about, she has nobody behind her to back her up on it. We're pressing the administration on that. You just saw the Newark elections. That was interesting. By and large, the issues that we're concerned about and the issues that affect us, again, are issues, whether you realize it or not, hopefully you do after this show today, are issues that affect you because you're paying for it one way or not. A general taxpayer, you may resent welfare, the existence of welfare, but the point is it's law, it's there. In my opinion, it's needed for those, especially those who are middle class who lost their jobs and now realize that they have to get food stamps, even though they may be ashamed to do so, they shouldn't be, or they may need other Medicaid or other services, and you're paying for it, and if you don't get that service, you're paying for it again because you paid your taxes all those years. And the other side is we're protecting our members because that's our job, is to protect them as a union. Because if we protect them and we make sure that they do their job correctly, working with management, that means you get your services and you get your money's worth and your taxes are well spent. So we thank you for joining us. We thank you for watching Labor's View. I'm David Weiner, host of the show and president of Local 1081 of CWA, and we hope to see you for future shows.
I have a voice, one that can speak for me. I have a say in my own destiny. Here on the job, no, it is not hard to see